Welcome, Ms Legalista here, aka Attorney Sheila. Glad you could join me. I have become so invested in Jussie Smollett. It's a year since that has really, I don't know, gotten to the point where it should have been wrapped up, but now he's filed this appeal. Fox Nation has this docu-series, and I feel like I want to go back and take a look at everything happened. The docu-series is Anatomy of a Hoax, and I'm doing some lives just after watching each episode to sort of talk about just some of the things that caught my eye as I was watching that. But I want to go back in this video and look at this complaint that was filed by the city of Chicago. Now, this has been a while. Remember, this event, this whole, I don't want to call it a nightmare, not my nightmare, this quote hoax, if that's what it was. He was convicted of it. I want to pull back up this complaint so that we can go over it and bring you back up to speed if you're just thinking about, this appeal that's going on, some of the interviews and things that are just happening, the information that's being put out there. But let's take a look at this complaint so that we don't have to guess. We know exactly what was said. All right, we're going to start with City of Chicago, Jussie Smollett, an individual. And this is really going to give us a play-by-play of what they were saying happened that night if you missed it. All right. Plaintiff is the city of Chicago. Defendant Jussie Smollett seeking relief against defendant for false statements he made to the city and seeking recovery of the costs of necessary services provided by the city due to defendant's violations of the MCC. This is the Municipal Code of Chicago. So here's what they allege. This is the nature of the case. This action is brought by the city to recover civil penalties, statutory treble damages, attorney's fees, costs arising from defendant's false statements to the city. On January 29th, 2019, defendant submitted a false police report claiming that he was the victim of a racist and homophobic beating by unknown attackers. In reality, defendant knew his attackers and orchestrated the purported attack himself. Later, when police confronted him with evidence about his attackers, he still refused to disclose his involvement in planning the attack. In investigating defendant's false statements and false police report, the city incurred significant costs in order to provide services reasonably related to defendant's conduct. Okay, so we have the parties there and the jurisdiction. So yes, Chicago is just like, hey, you filed this false report. We want our money back. That's basically what they're saying. All right, factual allegations here. In the fall of 2017, defendant became friends with an individual named Abimola. See, I just should not. Abel, who is 25 years old and has worked with defendant on Empire. During the course of their friendship, defendant and Abel socialized and exercised together, and defendant occasionally asked for Abel's assistance in obtaining recreational drugs. Now, I didn't know that part. That's a new one for me. Now, in the Fox, let me stop here. In the Fox docuseries, they refer to the brothers as Bola and Ola, but it's a little different here in this particular complaint, but that's okay. It's just harder for me to pronounce and say a person's name, but I should try to get that right. On the morning of January 25th, 2019, defendant texts Abel asking Abel, and I'm thinking like Cain and Abel, I don't know, would be leaving on his upcoming trip to Nigeria with his 27-year-old brother, Alan Binjo. We're going to call him Ola. That's what they have in parentheses there. Abel responded to defendant via text message that he and Ola were scheduled to depart the evening of January 29th, 2019. After Abel confirmed the date and time of his trip, defendant texted Abel, might need your help on the low. You around to meet up and talk face to face. Yes, because, sometimes we don't want to put everything in a text message. You would not believe the number of people who put incriminating information in text messages and then even share that information with people who they should not share it with. At least he said, let's meet face to face to talk about this. The same day, January 25th, 2019, GPS records, and people forget cell phones will tell everybody where you were. GPS records and video evidence indicate that defendant drove Abel from Empire's Sign Space studio to Abel's apartment. During the ride, defendant stated that he was unhappy with the way his employers handled a racist and homophobic letter he had allegedly received 3 days earlier. And as a result, he wanted to stage an attack where Abel would appear to batter him. So, for those of you who are just coming on board, this is the motive. This is appearing to be the motive. This is what Abel is putting forth to law enforcement later, saying, this is what he told me. This was the reason that he told me why he wanted to plan this attack. Video evidence shows that defendant and Abel reached Abel's apartment at approximately 5 p.m. on January 25th. When they arrived, Ola, who was then living with Abel, came out of the apartment and sat with defendant and Abel in defendant's vehicle. Once inside, defendant asked Ola if he could trust him, and Ola assented. After Ola attested to his trustworthiness, defendant and Abel and Ola, the Osundaro brothers, and I just call them the brothers, discussed their plan to stage a fake racist and homophobic attack on defendant. Defendant directed the brothers to stage the fake attack on the evening of January 28, 2019, near his apartment building in Streeterville. Defendant and the brothers agreed that the brothers would catch defendant's attention, and the fake attack would begin when the brothers called defendant and Empire F, Empire N. On January 27, 2019, video, GPS, and text message evidence indicates that defendant again met with the brothers to finalize the details of the staged attack. On that day, defendant drove the brothers to the location where he wanted the staged attack to take place, which was the corner of New Street and New Water Street in Chicago, Illinois. While at that location, defendant directed the brothers' attention to a surveillance camera, which defendant believed would capture the incident. So he has planned all of this out. This is when I want you to show up. Want you to stand here, because if you stand here, then I can act for the cameras and you can act for the cameras, and the cameras can get all of this down. And we want to portray this certain image. So he's got all of this figured out. He really is an actor. The defendant and the brothers coordinated the details of the fake attack. They agreed that Abel would attack defendant, but would not hurt him too badly, and would give defendant a chance to appear to fight back. Now, if you saw my live that I did talking about that first episode, if you actually go look at the first episode from the docuseries, they talk about this. Or it may be in the episode where they're talking about the brothers, but they talk about the brothers talk about the fact that he wanted to appear like he had fought back. And in this first episode, Jussie Smollett says just that at this performance that he gives in Chicago. He goes, I fought back. He says that, so for some reason, he felt the need to really be able to show that to people, that he fought back. All right, let's continue here. Get this back on camera. They also discussed having the brothers place a rope around defendant's neck and pour liquid on him. Now, the brothers say in this docuseries that they didn't put the rope around his neck, that they sort of placed it on him. Defendant told the brothers that he wanted the attack to take place the following night at 10 p.m. and instructed them not to bring their cell phones. I'm a little confused here, because I thought they said in the episode, I thought they said 2 a.m. I don't know. I'll have to go back and listen to that. Defendant provided Abel with a $100 bill to purchase the clothing and materials needed for the staged attack. During the same conversation in which defendant and the brothers planned the fake attack, defendant also gave Abel a $3,500 personal check made to Abel. The memo line of the check contained the words, 5-week nutrition workout program, don't go. Video evidence confirms that on January 28, 2019, the brothers purchased a rope at a hardware store and clothing items at a beauty supply store. Abel deposited the check defendant gave him into Abel's bank account on January 28, 2019. The following day, Abel transferred half of that amount, $1,750, to Ola's bank account. All right, now we're going to talk about how they execute this staged attack. After the run-through of the staged attack, defendant traveled to New York and was scheduled to return January 28, 2019. On the evening of January 28, 2019, defendant's flight into Chicago was delayed, and he called Abel telling him he needed to delay the staged attack, and Abel agreed. Defendant's plane landed at Chicago O'Hare at 12:30 a.m. on January 29, 2019. Well, here we go. This is where we get this mix up with the time, because I thought they did say in the video that it was 2 a.m. Cell phone records indicate that at 12:49 a.m., defendant and Abel spoke by telephone. During this call, defendant told Abel the attack should take place at 2 a.m. at the agreed upon location. Minutes later, Ola ordered an Uber to pick the brothers up at their home. The brothers took an Uber to the 1400 block of North Wells, where they flagged down a taxi that took them within 3 blocks of the agreed upon location of the staged attack. The taxi's in-car video captures the brothers flagging the car and riding in the back seat. From approximately 1:22 a.m. until approximately 2:03 a.m., video evidence shows the brothers on foot in an area bordered by Lakeshore Drive, Columbus Drive, Illinois Street, and the Chicago River. Video evidence also shows defendant returning to his Streeterville apartment at approximately 1:30 a.m. At 1:45 a.m., defendant left his building to walk to a nearby Subway restaurant at Illinois Street and McClurg Court. At 2 a.m., surveillance video shows evidence shows the brothers waiting near New Street and North Water Street. During an interview, defendant gave on ABC's Good Morning America, which aired on February 14, 2019, he positively identified the people shown in a still of this surveillance video, the still photo, as his attackers. The 2 men in this still photo are the brothers. Shortly after 2 a.m., the brothers staged their attack on defendant. After the staged attack, the brothers ran from the location, flagged a taxi, and were dropped off near their home at approximately 2:25 a.m. All right, C, defendant makes a false police report to the city. And this is the crux of what the city of Chicago is saying here. At 2:27 a.m., after defendant told his manager, Frank Gatson, that he had been attacked, Gatson called the Chicago Police Department to report the incident as a bona fide attack on defendant. At 2:42 a.m., two CPD officers arrived at defendant's apartment and found defendant with a rope draped around his neck. So he left that there. Defendant proceeded to make a false police report. Defendant told CPD officers that he was the victim of a racist and homophobic physical attack. Defendant made this report to the CPD officers despite knowing that the purported attack was not for racist or homophobic motives, that his purported attackers were in fact his acquaintances, and that he had asked his purported attackers, the brothers, to stage the attack. Defendant told the CPD officers that during the attack, his purported attackers had placed a rope around his neck, poured a liquid chemical on him, and told him that this is MAGA country. Defendant did not tell the CPD officers that his attack was staged at his direction and with the cooperation of the brothers. Defendant told the CPD officers that the incident happened near a camera that should have captured the attack. Well, there you go. Remember that planning he did? Oh, let me get in front of the camera. Here's the right camera, guys. Make sure you stand here in front of this camera. Here's why. That is the same camera defendant pointed out to the brothers on January 27, 2019. At no point did defendant inform police that he knew his attackers or recognized their appearance or voices. Instead, defendant misled the CPD officers when he described his attackers. Defendant told the CPD officers that his primary attacker, now known to be Abel, was wearing a ski mask that covered his entire face, with the exception of the area around his eyes, by which defendant could tell the attacker was white-skinned. Defendant made this statement despite knowing that the brothers are not white-skinned. By providing this false description, defendant misled the CPD officers to believe that his attackers were white, when in fact defendant knew that his attackers were the brothers. Defendant and the brothers continued to be in contact after the staged attack, including on January 29, 2019 at 7:45 p.m. and on January 30th, 2019 at 10:46 a.m. CPD investigates the defendant's false report at significant expense to the city. For the next 2 weeks, the CPD expended significant resources investigating defendant's false report of a high-profile hate crime and physical assault. Over 24 CPD officers and detectives participated in the investigation, ultimately spending weeks investigating defendant's false statements. During the course of CPD's investigation into defendant's false statements, CPD has incurred 1,836 overtime hours, which resulted in the city paying $130,106.15 in overtime pay as a result of defendant's false statements. And let me stop there, because that's not even the biggest problem with the use of CPD for this. That's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is there were probably other matters, other crimes, people that they could have been assisting while they were out running around, essentially chasing nothing, giving false information, wasting their time, when they could have been doing work to really help somebody who had had a crime committed against them, or someone who had lost a family member and needed investigative work done. And yet you have over 1,000 police hours used for this. That's a lot. That's a lot of time for a crime that winds up being a fake crime that a person gets convicted of doing. So that's just wrong on so many levels. Eventually, after an extensive investigation using interviews, surveillance videos, Office of Emergency Management pod videos, in-car taxi camera videos, rideshare records, bank records, and a store receipt, CPD identified the brothers as the perpetrators of the alleged attack. Now, remember, this is just February 13th. So it's not like this is 6 months later and they're tracking down the brothers. They are on top of this. The brothers returned from Nigeria. They were immediately and separately detained upon their arrival at O'Hare. CPD investigators thereafter obtained testimony and corroborating evidence from the brothers that showed defendant had orchestrated and staged the attack with the cooperation of the brothers, and that defendant's police report was false. Okay. On February 14th, 2019, CPD officers interviewed defendant again about the still photo that he had said on Good Morning America showed his attackers. Defendant again stated that he was certain that the still photo depicted the men who had attacked him. CPD officers then told defendant that the men in the still photo had been identified as the brothers. So that's the gotcha moment. Defendant made further false statements by claiming that his only relationship with the brothers was as trainers and social acquaintances, claiming that they could not have been his attackers. During the February 14th, 2019 interview, defendant again failed to inform the CPD officers that he knew that the brothers were his attackers and that he had orchestrated the attack with the brothers' assistance. Here's the thing. I have been reading up on this. I've never represented anyone who's been accused of making a false police report. But the one thing that I have heard is that generally law enforcement will give you an opportunity to come clean, to say that, okay, yes, I messed up. And that gotcha moment when they presented him with the still photo, because at this point in time now, they have now talked to the brothers. They have this still photo and they're coming back to Mr. Smollett and they're saying, okay, here's this photo, and we are identifying the brothers as being the perpetrators of this. And what does Mr. Smollett do? He doubles down on his lies, is what they're saying. They are saying that even after they presented who the perpetrators were, he still did not come clean. Now, had that been the case, this might not have continued to go along the path that it did. there might have been a different way forward for Mr. Smollett. But that was not to be the case because he did not back down even after being convicted. He did not back down. Violation of the FSO. The city incorporates all preceding allegations as if they were set forth herein. It says, any person who knowingly makes a false statement of material fact to the city in violation of any statute, ordinance, or regulation, or who knowingly makes a false statement of material fact to the city is liable to the city for a civil penalty of not less than $500 and not more than $1,000 plus 3 times the amount of damages which the city sustains because of the person's violation of this section. And this is the section of the city code that they are relying on. And then they go forward to say, MC section 121.010D, defendant knowingly made numerous false statements of material fact in violation of the FSO. Defendant knowingly made numerous false statements of fact to CPD officers, including when he made a police report alleging that he was the victim of a racist and homophobic attack when he knew that he had staged the attack with the assistance of the brothers. In addition, when presented with evidence that his statements were false, defendant again refused to inform CPD officers that he knew the brothers were his attackers and that he had orchestrated his staged attack with him. This is that second time they're bringing it back up. When he was presented with this evidence, again, he's just going to double down on the lie. Because of defendant's false statements, the city expended significant resources and manpower, including but not limited to over $130,000 in overtime that the city paid solely due to defendant's false statements. Defendant is liable to the city for a $1,000 civil penalty for each false statement he made to the city, in addition to 3 times the amount of damages that the city sustained, as well as litigation and collection costs and attorney's fees. So what are they asking for? Find the defendant liable for violating the FSO. Fine defendant a civil penalty of $1,000 for each false statement he made to the city. Enter judgment against defendant and in favor of the city for the civil penalties assessed and treble damages in an amount to be proven at trial, which includes but is not limited to overtime compensation paid by the city and incurred by the city because of the false statements, attorney's fees, and any other relief that the court deems just and equitable. And then we have the violation of the CRO, which says any person who causes the city or its agents to incur costs in order to provide services reasonably related to such person's violation of a federal, state, or local law, or such person's failure to correct conditions which violate any federal, state, or local law, when such person was under a legal duty to do so, shall be liable to the city for those costs. Includes costs regarding the provision of services here. Got a long list there. And so they're asking also for costs for that. And again, you also have penalties, attorney's fees, and all of that. And this was submitted by corporate counsel for the city of Chicago. So there you have that. That was the complaint that the city had filed. And again, it sort of lays out their position of what Mr. Smollett presented to them, how they were able to track down and provide the evidence regarding the brothers, and then how they went back to Mr. Smollett to say, hey, look, we found these perpetrators, but Mr. Smollett still didn't come clean. And so therefore, it's now, hey, this cost us a whole lot of money. It cost us a whole lot of time. And we think that you should have to pay for that. So that takes us back to a case from 2019, back up to 2023, where he's now filed his appeal of this conviction. And there's a new Fox Nation docuseries. So I hope that brings you up to speed if you're looking for some background information on this and gives you a better understanding of the complaint that was filed by the city of Chicago. So don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Peace.